Hey there. If you're here, then welcome. To me, to this moment, to a story that changed my life forever. I'm Mateo and Elias, and I want to take you back to the summer I met someone who made me believe in love, courage, and the beauty of being exactly who you are. This isn't just my story, it's ours. Mine, his, and maybe even yours too. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let me take you back to that humid evening on the pier where it all began. Oh, and hey, if this resonates with you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now let's dive in. It was one of those nights when the air felt heavy, sticky with secrets no one wanted to say aloud. The kind of night where the heat clings to your skin like it's trying to hold on to something. Something you can't quite name but feel deep in your bones. I sat at the edge of the pier, my legs dangling over the water, staring at the horizon like it held answers I couldn't quite reach. The sun had dipped below the waves hours ago, leaving behind streaks of orange and purple that bled into the darkening sky. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, its surface rippling under the faint glow of the moon. The sound of the waves was constant, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. It filled the silence inside me. The silence left by my dad walking out years ago. The silence of unanswered questions, unspoken fears. My mom tried her best to keep things together after he left, but sometimes I'd catch her sitting alone in the living room, holding an old photograph of her brother. She'd tremble as she stared at it, her lips moving silently, like she was praying or apologizing to someone who wasn't there anymore. I didn't ask about it. Some things you just don't talk about. That night, though, I needed to escape. Escape the suffocating quiet of our house, the church friends always dropping by with their pitying glances and rehearsed prayers. Escape the weight of feeling like I didn't belong. Not in my family, not in this town, not even in my own skin. So I went to the pier. It wasn't anything special, just weathered wood planks bolted together and jutting out into the sea. But it was mine, at least for those few hours when the world seemed far away. I liked sitting there, watching the water rise and fall, imagining it carrying my thoughts off somewhere they couldn't hurt me anymore. But then, something shifted. Someone appeared, a guy with chestnut brown hair and a sketchpad tucked under his arm. He moved like he owned the place, like the pier belonged to him as much as it did to me. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, sitting down beside me without waiting for an invitation. His voice was soft, curious, like he genuinely cared what I had to say. I shrugged, unsure how to explain the ache in my chest. "Just thinking." He smiled, pulling out his sketchbook. "I draw things I can't say," he said, showing me pages filled with crashing waves, birds frozen mid-flight, and faces that looked almost familiar, but not quite real. There was something about him, something magnetic, like he carried light within him. His greenish-brown eyes sparkled with mischief, and his grin was crooked but warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I'm Elias," he said finally, extending a hand toward me. I hesitated for a moment before shaking it. His grip was firm, steady, grounding. "Mateo," I replied, the word barely above a whisper. And just like that, we started talking. Not about anything big or important, but enough to make me realize I wasn't alone anymore. We talked about the stars, about how they looked closer here than anywhere else, about the way the ocean smelled different depending on the time of day, about random, insignificant things that somehow felt monumental because we were sharing them. Elias had this way of making you feel seen, like he could peel back all the layers you'd built around yourself and still find something worth loving. And as we sat there, side by side, I felt something stir inside me. Something I couldn't name yet but knew would change everything. As weeks turned into months, Elias and I became inseparable. It wasn't planned. It just happened, like the tide pulling us closer without us realizing it. We'd meet at the pier, beneath the sprawling oak tree near the library, or along the shoreline littered with seashells and broken glass. Each time, we shared pieces of ourselves, fragments of our fears, dreams, and silences. But let me back up for a second, because those early days weren't all smooth sailing. At first, there was this distance between us. Not physical, but emotional. like we were both standing on opposite sides of a river, unsure if it was safe to cross. Elias was easy to talk to, sure, but opening up? That was different. For me, vulnerability felt like stepping onto thin ice. You never knew when it would crack beneath you. And Elias, well, he had his own walls too. They weren't as obvious as mine, but they were there, hiding behind his sketches and quick smiles. One afternoon, we were sitting under the oak tree, its branches casting dappled shadows across the grass. The air smelled like earth and wildflowers, and the cicadas buzzed lazily in the background. Elias had his sketchpad balanced on his knees, drawing something I couldn't see yet. "What's that?" I asked, nodding toward the page. He hesitated for a moment before flipping it around to show me. It was a portrait, not of a person, but of two hands reaching out to one another, fingertips barely touching. The lines were soft, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether to make the connection complete. "It's us," he said quietly, glancing at me sideways. "Kinda." I stared at the drawing, my chest tightening. How did he do that? How did he take something so intangible, the fragile thread connecting us, and turn it into something tangible, something real? "You're good," I said finally, though the words felt inadequate. He shrugged, brushing a strand of hair out of his face. "Thanks, but it's not done yet." We sat in silence after that, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. Then, out of nowhere, I found myself speaking. "My mom has these pictures," I began, surprising even myself, "of her brother. She gets this look on her face whenever she holds them, like she's remembering something painful. I don't know what happened to him, but sometimes I think maybe he left because he couldn't stay. You know?" Elias nodded slowly, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, I get that. Do you?" I asked, turning to look at him. He hesitated, then sighed. "My parents fight all the time. About money, about work, about stupid stuff. They act like everything's fine around me, but I hear them late at night. Their voices carry through the walls." He paused, tracing the edge of his sketchpad with his finger. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a house made of cracks, waiting for it to fall apart." I didn't know what to say to that, so instead, I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was awkward. He stiffened slightly, surprised, but then he relaxed, letting the gesture sink in. "We're okay," I said softly, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince him or myself, and somehow, in that moment, we were. But it wasn't always like that. There were moments when things felt messy, complicated, like the day Elias told me about his dad. We were walking along the beach, the waves lapping at our feet, when he suddenly stopped and sat down in the sand. "What's wrong?" I asked, crouching beside him. He picked up a stick and started drawing jagged lines in the wet sand. "My dad hates my art," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "He says it's useless, that I should focus on real things instead." I frowned, anger bubbling inside me. "That's bullshit." Elias laughed bitterly. "Tell him that." "I will," I shot back, only half joking. For a while, neither of us spoke. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the world seemed impossibly vast compared to the tiny space we occupied. Finally, Elias broke the silence. "You ever feel like you're running out of time?" he asked, looking at me with those piercing greenish-brown eyes. I thought about it for a moment. "All the time." He nodded like he expected that answer. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let's promise something," he said abruptly. "What?" "To stop waiting, to stop being afraid, to just live." I stared at him, caught off guard by the intensity in his voice. "Okay," I said finally. "Promise." And that's exactly what we did. From that day on, we stopped holding back, at least as much as we could. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories, dreams, fears. Elias showed me how to see beauty in the ordinary. The way sunlight filters through leaves, the sound of rain tapping against a window. And I tried to teach him how to be still, how to sit with the quiet and let it fill you rather than consume you. Looking back, I realize now that those moments, The ones where we let our guards down, where we allowed ourselves to be seen, they were the foundation of everything that came after. Because love doesn't start with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It starts with fragments. Fragments of trust, of understanding, of simply being with someone else. If you're feeling this so far, if these little moments resonate with you, drop a comment below telling me which part stood out to you. Was it the raw honesty of their conversations? The quiet strength they found in each other? Let me know, I read every single one. Now, let's keep going because things are about to get even more intense. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. One evening, under a sky streaked with hues of gold and violet, everything changed. That day had been different. Charged with something I couldn't quite name but felt buzzing beneath my skin like electricity. Elias and I were sitting on the pier again, our usual spot. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in fiery shades of orange and pink that bled into the ocean below. The air smelled salty and sweet, and the waves lapped gently against the wooden pillars beneath us. It should have been peaceful, serene even, but there was tension between us. Thick, unspoken, and impossible to ignore. We'd spent hours talking, or at least he had. I mostly listened, nodding or offering short responses whenever necessary. But this time, his words weren't about art or dreams or random observations about the world around us. They were deeper, heavier, like he was reaching for something just beyond his grasp. "Do you ever think we're just waiting?" he asked suddenly, breaking the rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore. His voice was soft, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. I turned to look at him, surprised. "Waiting for what?" He shrugged, staring out at the water. "For permission. To be who we are." The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Permission? From whom? From society? From our families? From ourselves? I opened my mouth to respond but hesitated, my heart pounding like the surf against the shore. For so long, I'd lived in fear of rejection, of judgment, of not being enough. But sitting there next to Elias, watching the way the fading light caught in his hair, making it glow like fire, I realized something. I didn't want to wait anymore. "Maybe," I said softly, my voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. "But maybe we don't need permission." Elias turned to look at me then, his greenish-brown eyes wide and searching, like he was trying to see straight through me. There was a vulnerability in his gaze that made my chest ache, a longing I recognized because it mirrored my own. And then, slowly, tentatively, he leaned forward. My breath hitched in my throat as the space between us disappeared, until finally, his lips met mine. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, like neither of us was sure if it was real. But then it deepened, becoming fierce and tender all at once. It tasted of salt water and longing, of years of unspoken words and shared silences. In that moment, I felt everything. The weight of all the things we hadn't said, the fear of what might come next, and the undeniable truth that I never wanted to let go. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing heavily, I couldn't speak. Words felt inadequate, like they could never capture the enormity of what had just happened. Instead, I reached out and took his hand, threading my fingers through his. "Okay," I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. "No more waiting." Elias smiled, his eyes shining with tears he refused to let fall. "Okay." That kiss, it changed everything. Not just for us, but for me. Before Elias, I'd spent so much time running, hiding, trying to escape the parts of myself I didn't understand. But in that moment, I stopped running. I stopped fighting. Because here's the thing about love, it doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase your fears or make the world magically okay. What it does do is give you strength. Strength to face the things you've been avoiding, strength to be brave when bravery feels impossible. After that night, things shifted between us. We weren't just friends anymore, we were something more. Something undefined, unspoken, but undeniably real. And while it scared me sometimes, it also gave me hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could be exactly who I was meant to be, and that Elias would be right there beside me, holding my hand every step of the way. After that night on the pier, everything changed. And yet, nothing did. The world kept spinning. The waves kept crashing. And life went on as if our lives hadn't been irrevocably altered by one simple kiss. But for me and Elias, everything felt different. At first, it was like we were walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around this new reality between us. We'd hold hands when no one was looking, stealing glances across crowded rooms, whispering secrets late at night under the stars. It was exhilarating, terrifying, beautiful, all at once. But then, reality came knocking. It started small. A comment here, a look there. Someone saw us holding hands at the beach one evening and whispered something to their friend. Another time, I caught Sophia, the girl who hung out with us sometimes, staring at us curiously, like she was piecing things together but wasn't quite sure what she'd found yet. Elias noticed too. He tried to brush it off, saying people would talk no matter what, but I could see the tension building behind his smile. And honestly, I felt it too. That gnawing fear in the pit of my stomach, the kind that tells you the world isn't ready for you. Not yet. One day, we were sitting at our usual spot beneath the oak tree near the library when Elias suddenly slammed his sketchbook shut. "What's wrong?" I asked, startled by the sudden movement. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a stick and started drawing jagged lines in the dirt, just like he used to do on the beach. Finally, he sighed. "I overheard Mrs. Alvarez talking to my mom yesterday," he said quietly. She said she thinks we're spending too much time together." My heart sank. Mrs. Alvarez was the town gossip, always sticking her nose where it didn't belong. If she'd said something to Elias's mom, chances were others had heard it too. "What did your mom say?" I asked cautiously. Elias shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "She didn't say much, just told me to be careful. Be careful." Those two words hung in the air like storm clouds, heavy and ominous. Be careful of what? Of being happy, of loving someone, of being ourselves. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out," I said firmly, though I wasn't entirely sure how true those words were. Elias nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder. Rumors spread like wildfire in a small town, twisting truths until they became something unrecognizable. People stared at us when we walked down the street together. Some kids at school made snide comments about those two always hanging out. Even Sophia seemed unsure of how to act around us sometimes, torn between loyalty and fear of being associated with us. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit, because deep down, I knew part of me still believed I could change, to fit into the mold everyone expected me to fill. But every time I looked at Elias, I remembered why I couldn't, why I wouldn't. One evening, after another long day of sideways glances and hushed conversations, Elias showed up at my house unexpectedly. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying, and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched his sketchpad to his chest. "Hey," I said softly, stepping aside to let him in. He collapsed onto the couch without a word, burying his face in his hands. I sat down beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "What happened?" I asked gently. He took a shaky breath before answering. "My dad found some of my sketches today. Ones of us." My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" Elias shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "He called them disgusting. Said I was wasting my time drawing such filth." The anger that surged through me was sharp and immediate. How dare anyone call love filth? How dare they try to shame him for expressing himself? "We don't need his approval," I said fiercely, gripping his hand tightly. "You're amazing, Elias. Your art, it's beautiful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He looked at me then, his greenish-brown eyes filled with pain and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, "for believing in me." And in that moment, I realized something important. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were fighting for each other. The turning point came during the annual summer festival, a celebration of music, food, and community that brought everyone in town together. Elias and I had debated whether or not to attend, knowing full well the rumors swirling around us. But in the end, we decided to go, not because we wanted to prove anything to anyone, but because we refused to let fear dictate our lives. As we walked through the crowded streets hand in hand, I could feel the weight of stares following us wherever we went. Some people smiled politely, others turned away, shaking their heads. But we didn't care. Not really. That is, until we ran into Mr. Vega, Elias's father. He stood near the edge of the square, glaring at us with an expression so cold it sent chills down my spine. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby townsfolk. Elias stiffened beside me, but he didn't let go of my hand. "I'm living my life," he replied calmly, though I could hear the tremor in his voice. Mr. Vega sneered. "Your life? This isn't living. This is unnatural." The word stung, but Elias didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, meeting his father's gaze head-on. "Maybe it is unnatural to you," he said, his voice steady now, "but it's who I am, and I won't apologize for it." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mr. Vega turned and walked away, leaving behind a stunned crowd. Elias exhaled sharply, leaning against me for support. "You okay?" I asked, brushing a strand of hair out of his face. He nodded, managing a weak smile. "Yeah, better than I thought I'd be." And somehow, after that, things began to shift. Not overnight, but gradually. People still whispered, still judged, but fewer openly confronted us. Sophia became our strongest ally, standing up for us whenever someone dared to criticize. Even my mom softened, offering quiet encouragement in her own way. Through it all, Elias and I held on to each other, finding strength in vulnerability, beauty in imperfection. Together, we discovered that love wasn't about erasing differences or silencing doubts. It was about embracing the chaos and trusting that even amidst uncertainty, we could create something enduring. Years later, when I stood on that same pier watching the sun dip below the horizon, I remembered Elias's words, "We're not just surviving this life, we're painting it." And as I traced the constellation tattooed on my wrist, a gift from Elias, I knew we had painted ours with colors brighter than any sunset. And that's it. That's the story of me and Elias. Two people navigating the complexities of love, identity, and acceptance. What did you think? Did our journey inspire you? Move you? Make you believe in the magic of human connection? If you enjoyed this audiobook, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment sharing your favorite part, and subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Every bit of support helps bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, remember, no matter where you are or who you're with, we're all connected beneath the same sky.